Welcome to Reputation Revolution. This is the podcast where we help individuals like you to establish your voice in the marketplace, enhance the credibility of that voice, extend the reach of your story and your message, and finally, extract value from your efforts in building a meaningful personal brand that's both recognized and respected. Now, on with the show.
Welcome to the Reputation Revolution podcast. I'm your host, Trevor Young, as always, and I've got with me today Bea Abalti. Bea, tell us where you're coming to us from, and because we're going to get very meta today, we're going to be talking all about podcasts on a podcast.
Hi, Trevor. Thank you for having me. So I'm from Worcester, and I work with small business owners to help them with their podcast, mainly the post-production of it. Anything from editing to writing show notes, publishing and promoting.
There are quite a few elements to it, but and I think we'll get into a bit of that. But really what I want to unpack with you, because you came across my radar because you've been put a call out for doing a survey and insights into business owners' podcasts and how they're doing their podcast and some of the challenges they face and what they find is working, etc. So I thought it was really timely. We're coming to the end of season 7 of the podcast, but this was very fresh data, and it just gives me a great opportunity to talk to someone who's deep into podcasts, love podcasts, and we'll get into that. But what do you do from a day-to-day perspective from podcasts? So you're helping. You work with mainly small business owners to get their podcasts up. What are the key things that people are sort of coming to you for?
So what they're coming to me for is mainly to make sure that their podcasts are optimized for search. So because I'm using SEO for their show notes, for their titles, when I'm editing. So it's mainly that, because independent podcaster, the key area, the key problem is to get the podcast discovered. So I think that's what people are trying to do, get in front of their listeners. Yep. So that's why I'm
getting more people to find it, to try it, to like it, to subscribe to it, to share it, to do reviews of it. There's quite a bit. So let's rip into the survey results.
Yes.
And so the first bit is around the journey and the format and the frequency. So a lot of people that you've surveyed, obviously they're actual podcasters and they're running businesses as well, so probably pretty time poor. The majority, 72%, have said they've got a regular podcast that goes out like clockwork. And that's really important, isn't it? I mean, it's out of all the things, same with the YouTube show, and I guess even if you're blogging, that frequency is really important.
It is, yes. And I think this is why you don't have to release one. I don't think you don't have to release one every week. It's probably more important to stick to a frequency you're comfortable with and do it regularly.
Yeah, at 72% people have they've worked that bit out, that they're regular with it and they put it out on time. A smaller percentage, only 9%, used to be regular with their podcast, but other work got in the way. I'm surprised that's only 9%, but that's something that an issue that people follow. And another interesting part was the format. So you talked about audio versus video. And audio and video, because now podcasting straddles all of them.
Yes, it
63% is audio and video, that's a big shift, because for a very long time it was just audio only.
Yes, exactly. I think it's a way to engage with a broader audience, and also it's easier to promote having a video. So that's what people go for, that. And it's just one recording and you've got both audio and video, which is great.
Yeah. And I think that's what I do here on the podcast here. I mean, it's some people might watch it on YouTube. We know YouTube is rolling out as an actual podcasting platform as well. I think that's just a slow rollout that a few podcasters are jumping on, because why wouldn't you? But I guess the key there is What I use it for is that we can cut it up into snippets and promote it across social media, which is to do that audio only. We had to create what was called audiograms, and I think the video side of things is probably a little bit more interesting in that. What are the tools that you see people using a lot? I use Riverside, Riverside.fm, which I really like, but I know others use Zoom and Zencaster. What are some ways that people are recording?
So, well, there's that Riverside and Zoom, but I also have clients who are using a complete separate camera and their phone as well to record interview outside, on site. Very satisfied with the quality of his camera, of his the camera on his phone. They're very good now, so you can also use that. But yeah, otherwise, Riverside obviously will help. Will have a bit more functions than Zoom, and probably better quality as well.
Yep.
So yeah, anything like this.
Much better quality. A few backups and you don't need an app for it. You can record as we are through the web browser. And I think the other key part of that is that, and as the technology gets a bit better and a bit easier, you can shoot it off your phone. You just need a microphone, which doesn't really cost that much anymore, and they really do the job. And the only limitations, of course, when you do it face to face is geography. And but you might be, two people not even an interview show, isn't there? I mean, there's that many different formats, and it might be you're with one other person or two other people. It's like a panel, and that's when you would film it yourself, I would imagine.
Sure. Yes. Yeah.
And so we're also talking frequency. So this is where it gets interesting, because we talked about in the journey before, 72% of people put it out regular, but now we're talking actual frequency, and it's 46% do it every week, which is very admirable, because it's I know what it's like to get one out every week, and then and then 27% is every other week, so fortnightly. So really, a good chunk, nearly, like 2/3 or 3/4 really is just doing it either a week or a fortnightly, and that's kind of what you've got to do, isn't it?
Yes, I'd say yes, because any less frequent than that, that means that you'll have to have loads of material to keep it going in between. When I say material, it's like clips maybe, and snippets and all in that, so just to keep the attention of the audience. But I would say I was very surprised with the every week, considering that one of the main points is lack of time. So kudos on that to all the podcasters, but yeah, every other week, something like that is probably, we even have 2 episodes a week, the 9%. So this is quite incredible. 9%
doing 2 a week. So that's very admirable.
Exactly. So very, very good to see that, to be fair. That's really great.
Yeah, so that means that people who are getting into it, who you surveyed, they're really putting their effort in.
Yes.
And podcasting does take effort, and only 18% of people are really, I don't release one consistently. It just depends on when I have time to produce an episode, which really means they're not super serious about it. So when you look at that, 4/5 are either every week, twice a week, or every fortnight. So that's really good to see. You asked the question, why do independent businesses have or want a podcast? And it was really good to see, because I think this is where podcasting goes really well for businesses, is really to build brand authority. That's what 54% of people said that. And then the next ones were to engage with an audience, and then they've got an interest in the topic and support for other activities that they do. So it's also on 36%. So they're very good reasons to do it. But interestingly, 27% are doing it to boost SEO. That you were mentioning earlier that you do a lot of SEO for people. What's your take on SEO with podcasting, and how effective can it be?
It can work 2 ways with podcasts. So often people are starting a podcast to boost their SEO overall for their website, for other things. But they're also SEO is also needed for your podcast to be discovered. So you have to look at both ways, really, when launching one. One, make sure that your episode is discoverable. And secondly, use your podcast to boost your SEO overall with other product services, website, etc.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. And of course, you need to be discovered before you can start building the brand authority. But it's good to see such a large proportion. 54% of people want to build brand authority. It's very hard just to sell straight off the back of it. Although 27% said to sell affiliate products or services. So, usually that's a byproduct with a call to action. Most times it is a building trust, developing connection with an audience, and then there's that call to action and getting people to subscribe, trust you, like what you talk about, and then over time move them to your email list, so you can then maybe they'll buy a few at a certain time. Now, so because we're talking about being discoverable is one thing, staying top of mind with people, and getting new audiences, that's probably, I think, the toughest thing for a podcaster to be doing. You had as your podcast's promotional strategy, 72% of people were using social media. I would have thought that'd probably be 100%, but that's still a hefty amount. And of course, that's where social media is good. And I guess if you're doing interview shows, or you're doing a panel type thing, or you're riffing directly into a mic and it's a solo podcast, being able to cut those up and repurpose them is a great way to just even add value to your audience on social media. And 63% of people have a podcast landing page. What do you know about that over and above that figure? Are you talking about they've created its own web page, or it's a landing page on their own website?
Usually it's a landing page on their own website because it ties in nicely with the rest of your content, doesn't it?
Yes.
But some people don't have it. But I think that's an important thing to have. Again, for SEO to bring people to your website, but it also ties in with your blog page. You could have a blog page and you have a podcast page, and then you've got the rest of your website. And it's a way to bring people onto your website and discover your services or your products. So I think it's quite
that's
important.
Right. And of course, when you're on the podcast, you tell people to go back to the show notes, which is on your on the blog or the podcast page on your website. And just a little tip for people who, if they've got a WordPress site and they've got a blog on it, you can put it in as a blog post and then tag it as your podcast, and then anything with that tag comes up, that's only the podcast will come up, and you can then put that in your menu. So without putting an extra post in one on your blog and one on your podcast, it's really the one entry, the one post, but you can put a separate menu item. So people who just want to go to the podcast and don't want to scroll through all your blog posts, they can do that pretty easily. And interestingly, 18% cross-promotion with other podcasts. I think that's a really, really good way of going. I mean, obviously, if you're getting together with other podcasters, is that more of a being interviewed on other people's podcasts, or just you promote them, they promote you? How did you see that?
I see that one more as being interviewed. Yes, which is a way to reach an already engaged audience, isn't it? So. Yes, I see it as that, and also seeing as all of the respondent wants to be a guest, I would think that's what it is. Yes. Yeah.
And that makes so much perfect sense. I had recently on the podcast Chris Ward, and she's written the book and got the podcast Win the Hour, Win the Day, and a really successful podcast with, I think she's, if I'm going by memory, about 1,000 5-star reviews. And but she's also been a guest on 400 guest interviews on other people's podcasts, and it's that cross-pollination I think works really, really well, because people, if they hear you on a podcast, they obviously listen to podcasts, and therefore they're in the market. And we know that podcast listening is an ongoing, increasing growth market in that regards. We talked about podcast episodes getting repurposed earlier, and the social media posts is where the main lot is. But interestingly, 27% of people repurposing it for newsletters. So is that just meaning they're promoting it, or they're actually using the newsletter to like embed a video and then people click on the video and go and listen to it? I know I use Substack, and Substack is actually now a podcasting platform as well. So is that how you're seeing people do that? Because that's good. It's showing that people are starting to integrate at least, and that's where things make perfect sense.
I'm hoping that they are doing some of that, but yes, I would think that they're using the content or whatever topic they are talking about to repurpose as a newsletter. But it's good that you can integrate clips at least of your podcasts. I think it just brings so much more weight to it. So yes, that's a great tool.
And it's interesting. I mean, you can take an interview or a riff that you've done and turn it into an article. It doesn't have to be, called a podcast at all. You could say, if you want to listen to the full podcast interview, if it's an interview or the episode, this is where to go. But people, people still read, and you've gone the effort of researching for a podcast episode, recording it, producing it. It can make for a good article, or as you say, a newsletter article as well, which can work for a lot of people. It's interesting that 18%, again, I don't have time to repurpose my episodes. So, I think if you're going to the effort of creating a podcast, you certainly want it out there, and that's part of building authority and getting your name out there. So I'm surprised that people aren't doing that, but I guess, life gets in the way, doesn't it?
No, I understand that. I just think that you should repurpose every bit of content that you produce. And not everybody will have seen it either. So when you repurpose, it gives a different audience maybe to see it in a different format again. So yeah, absolutely, repurpose always.
And sometimes you think, particularly with the weekly, and I repurpose a lot of it, and I take snippets, and I might get a handful of snippets from each interview and with the guest and stuff, and you sometimes feel like, everyone's seeing this a million times, but really they're not, particularly on LinkedIn with the way the algorithm's going. And if the snippets are good and the content's good, and it's actually often it's someone else, it's not actually you talking as well if it is an interview show. So I think it can be quite powerful in that regard. So the biggest podcast challenges faced by business owners, we're podcast advocates and we love it, and we'll, talk it up quite a lot. But, let's be real too. There's a little bit involved. And yes, you can get help from people like yourself who can do the show notes and the editing and the publishing, or you do it yourself. But at the end of the day you've highlighted some of the challenges here. So 7 out of 10 struggle to find the time to publish their podcast. Now, that's interesting. They struggle to find the time, but they still are, really putting their effort in and getting it done. So I think, yes, they're struggling to find the time, but yes, they're actually, what was that figure again? 72% are putting it out like clockwork. Yeah. And, most of them are putting it out on a weekly, fortnightly basis. So that's pretty good. They acknowledge the time, though, it takes. Yes. How long, in your mind, does it take, once the interview's done, I mean, you do the work in the back end, how long does it, and you know what you're doing and you're doing it all the time, and you obviously got it systematized, but how long on average does it take to get a raw interview and get it ready and up and out?
So I've estimated about an interview of about 30 to 45 minutes. It can take between 15 and 20 hours to take it from the recording to, so now we're talking up until promoting, right? So 15 to 20 hours, plus obviously all the times for the planning. So that doesn't include time for planning the show, recording, and all that. So yeah. It's a lot of time.
So that's a fair bit. So that's in the editing, uploading, developing the show notes, which can, if
Yes.
you do extensive show notes, not everyone does, that can take time. Clipping up all the things, the snippets, getting it out there and promoting it ongoing. Yeah, that's a generous amount of time. So
It is,
you know,
yeah.
you can always do things quicker.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that's of all the people. They might have a team working for them, or they might have some automation, or they might skip a few steps as well. To be able to release episodes so often. I'm talking like a full service of complete clips and everything. But yeah, it's a lot of time.
Yep.
It's a lot of time, and it takes podcasts a lot of time to thrive as well, to really do well. It's a long game.
Oh, it is definitely a long game, I can tell you that. And so 6 out of 10 struggle to get their listeners to take action. That doesn't surprise me. I would have imagined it might have been a bit more, but 6 out of 10 struggle to get their listeners to take action. I guess those that are asking them to take action, I guess the key action points would be to visit the website, download a template or a checklist or something. It might be to subscribe or, review us on Apple or something like that. Are they the key calls to action that you see?
So there was actually, funnily enough, there was one of the big names podcast that was also struggling with this. I think they were getting a lot of people to watch and listen, but no one was subscribing to his channel. So he was doing an appeal at the beginning, asking people to, can you please subscribe if you like this episode? So it is a tricky one to get people to take action, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, and I think the thing is, if people subscribe, that at least you're on their palette, their listening palette or whatever, their radar and part of the repertoire that's on their phone, which is pretty important. But and they might batch listen. They might not listen to it on the spot every week, but they might go back. I see that people batch listen. My things go up and down. How do you know about? I'm not so sure how, and it might be just the podcast platform that I use. How to find actual subscribers, because I've found that that's a bit of a shaky figure to find your. You can find your downloads. You can get your downloads usually by the podcast platform, but actual subscribers across the multitudes of apps, Apple and Google and Amazon, etc. Is there an accurate way of finding that out or not?
I'm not quite sure. Sorry, I was talking about YouTube subscriber in this instance. For YouTube podcasts. No, they tend to just show your downloads more. It really varies, doesn't it? Hosting platforms have got different ways. Some don't drill down very far into the data. Because what's interesting to see, for example, that you don't always have is whether people listen on their phone or the computer or anything like that. It can help a little bit as well. But yeah, so subscriber, that be in terms of YouTube, but on the other hosting platforms, it's usually downloads. Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
And of course, 5 out of 10 struggle to find the time to promote their podcast. So time is an issue, and we'll get into shortly what are some tips that, if people are going to tackle podcast, how can they sort of try and speed the process up a bit so it doesn't kill them in time? Well, we're sort of going into the next thing in the research was measuring your podcast performance. So 91% use the analytics tool on their podcast hosting platform. So for those who haven't yet gone into doing a podcast, you can't just put it out there. You've got to actually go through an actual podcast platform. You can't go direct to Apple, for example. I use a company called podcast.co. They must have got in early and got that URL. Libsyn is another one, Libsyn, Podbean. Gosh, there's a lot. What are some of the other podcast hosts hosting platforms that you use, and which ones do you recommend?
It's mainly Podbean and Libsyn.
Yeah, there are so many. Libsyn and Podbean are the ones that I've probably used a lot as well with my clients. Buzzsprout, I find, is very user-friendly and got really good analytics, and it shows a cumulative listenership, which I like, because if you're building a listenership, that's going to go higher up than a week-by-week downloads. So that's always a good one to look at. So they're the three: Libsyn, Podbean, or Buzzsprout, I think, is probably the best in terms of user-friendliness.
There's also Spotify that has a free podcast creator platform.
Yep.
So there's that one as well.
I don't know a lot about that, but they bought Anchor, didn't they?
Yeah.
Because all the things you're just saying, it's hard to get, fantastic data, but 82% put the number of downloads as their top metric. So that would make sense to me, is that, yes, you want to see how your podcast is doing. So most people are doing that, which is good to see. And 82% say downloads is the number one. And, some say engagement comes third at 27%, but I don't know how you actually, depending on your host, how you can find your engagement. Some you can and some you can't. So it's a bit of potluck there, depending on which platform you use. So you've also included some other data from the Ofcom podcast survey. So you've combined this with what you went out and got through, and you've got someone who helped you with that, Adam Bowie. You've sourced some of his statistics.
Yes.
Tell us about Ofcom, because Ofcom is that's a UK based, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, podcast survey. So this is, and I'll just read this out, because what about podcast listeners? How are they? It's one thing for us to be creating podcasts, putting out there, but it's good to know what listeners are doing out there. So 32% said word of mouth and social media scored as places for listeners to hear about new podcasts. So that makes sense. A third, I'd probably, I'm surprised it's not a bit higher, but, that's where you often will see a bit about a podcast first. Do you find that once you become a podcast listener that, you might find them more through, I listen to them on, some people would listen to them on Apple, for example, or Spotify, and because they're recommendation engines, once you get into the podcast system, you're probably finding out more about them via the recommendations from Apple, etc. Do you find that?
I do, actually, yes. Yeah. Once there are a couple of them that I like, it's what's recommended to me next that I'm usually going for. So, Yep. That's a strong one, yeah.
Excellent. 35% of week.
Sorry, interestingly as well, this statistic is also for younger listener. So it's not, it goes, the fact that word of mouth and social media being very important for listeners to find new podcasts is across all demographics. So that's a quite good one.
Yep. And you've also got here 35% of weekly podcast listeners access podcasts via YouTube, which that's a big amount. So walk us through that. Is this the new podcast app on YouTube, or is it the videos?
I wouldn't say that it's the new podcasts only. I don't think so. Just for the fact that some people don't even use that. They just use their channel to actually put their podcast on, which is just content, really. I guess it's just people like to see who's talking to them, or some do anyway. I also find when it's an interview, I quite like to watch the people talking. And some people who just have a conversation or are so funny that you just want to watch them as well. So I don't know. I think just people feel more engaged with their speaker when they see them, I guess.
Yeah, no, I agree. And look, this is becoming a really big thing. It's really a show, and it's a video show or it's a podcast audio show. That's the beauty of doing this, is you really start cutting across all the modalities. And, I think the 35%, I think you're right. I think, the actual podcast app side of it, where YouTube becomes your podcast hosting platform. I don't know enough about that just yet, but what I would assume that is, a lot of people have got they've got a YouTube app on their phone, and if you're on public transport, you're sitting there watching a video, and that could just as easily be you're watching or listening at the same time. And don't forget, a lot of people put audio up as a video, so there's actually no people. You can it's just the audio with a picture on it, and so we see that as well. So that's really interesting. That from the Ofcom Podcast Survey 2023, 35% of weekly podcast listeners access podcasts via YouTube. So much more to go there with YouTube, and then the next one is 32%. So a third. Also, of weekly regular listeners frequently listen to podcasts that also have videos. So that kind of, that makes sense given the previous figure. But that's where it's heading. That's a lot. I think that's a really big insight, that.
It is. And also, I think with platforms such as, so there is YouTube, which is used as a search engine, and also TikTok, where people just look for things. It's no longer just making a little dance and things like so. So it allows you to also use those platforms to reach out people, and that's important. So that's where the video is becoming important, I think.
Yeah, indeed. And then there's a stat here, 58% of weekly listeners do listen to other, and it's in quotes, other independent podcasters. Yeah. Break this down for us. I take it you mean the non-celebrity, big-time media company ones.
The big names. Yeah, that's right. So like small business owners I work with, they would be considered as independent podcasters, or people who just want to talk about a subject that interests them and they want to share. So these types of podcasters, because otherwise, in the other sections it was BBC, so you would have BBC and celebrities, big names, so you can't really compete with that, can you? So it's quite interesting to see that people are still listening to or giving an importance to independent podcaster, which is great. It's encouraging.
Well, it's very encouraging. And the thing there too is that I think that this is the great thing about podcasting, is that, you can go deep into a niche. In fact, it's best to be deep into a niche. Good luck going wide on anything. And that's where the independent podcasters, as you call them, that aren't part of a media company or a major celebrity, that's where that's working. And I mean, the people I talk to, and this is only anecdotal, but, they listen to their favourite small ones, independent ones, but they might, listen to a big, it might be a radio station that has a podcast, or, the celebrity type, Joe Rogan type ones as well. So it's, I think podcast listeners are, those who listen to a number of podcasts, not just that they have one or two favourite shows, but they spread it out a bit. It just really depends on their interests and how many podcasts that they subscribe to. That is encouraging, though. That's really good. And what that tells me is that there's room. A lot of people say, too many podcasts out there, I'll never get any traction. And yes, you won't get traction if you don't put it out regularly and if you don't promote it and repurpose it and get across all the platforms. That's certain. But people will give you a go. And, it doesn't have to be as slick as the big-time celebrity ones.
No, exactly. And there's a lot of interesting subjects that are available to talk about, and just I think it shows if you have the passion for something, people will get interested.
Yeah, that's for sure. That's for sure. And I think the other thing with the independent ones is around a passion or a business interest, or an interest that might be business oriented, but it's they're either the lifestyle ones which people are passionate about, and you're going to hear that, or it's about their area of expertise and best practice on something or how to do something educational. And whereas a lot of the bigger ones I find a bit more probably more entertaining. They're there for entertainment's sake.
Yes, yeah.
Which shows you've still got to entertain. You've still got to entertain if you can, even while you're educated. So you summarise by saying podcasting is a long game. It takes patience, consistency and perseverance for shows to establish themselves. So that is absolutely it. You said that earlier. It's a long game. And I think that, if people are going into it, so you talk to people who are at the start of their journey, what are they really ready for the long game by the time they get to you? What's the story there?
So some would say that they want to have one. They think it's right for them in their business. However, they are waiting because they don't think that they will. They don't have the time for the consistency it requires yet. But like I said, if you don't have the time now, you probably will never have the time because there will always be something in the way with your business. So you have to make the time for it. People starting often think that they'll just wait a little bit. They'll find the time somewhere, but you have to make it. So yeah. So I'll help them with that, obviously. But I find some who have started have really pulled through and really put a lot of work, but it's often is the people who are really, really passionate about what they're talking about and who really answer what their audience wants to hear as well. So those are usually the successful ones. You've got to enjoy it as well. I don't think if you don't enjoy doing it, I don't think it lasts.
Are you finding people are doing the interview show like this one more, or they're doing it in panels, or 2 or 3 of them? 4 gets pretty unwieldy, or they do the solo one. Which ones are you seeing trend on any of those?
I think discussions, either 2 people in the same room discussing a subject, or the interview is usually the one that I think is the one that's going ahead at the moment, that's taking a bit more space, just because it's more entertaining to listen to rather than someone talking by themselves, and it's just the way it is. So yeah, I would say that either an interview or a discussion between 2 people or 3 people, 4 might be a bit like you said. That's the format that I see going forward.
Yep. And I will say, to do the solo riffing episodes can be, you need to be a lot more probably prepped. I know some people actually script it out, which takes a whole different ball game in terms of scripting it out. So it's, that's a big decision you're making, because it will take a lot more time, and it'll probably take a bit more time in editing it as well. If you stop and start, if you someone who stops and starts and ums and ahs a lot. You've got on your website, you've got a stat there saying 90% of podcasts don't get past episode number 3. So it's that's a bit devastating, isn't it?
That's a devastating data. But the more I haven't got any data with me right now to discuss that, but I'll find it and put it on my website. But reading all those things, even when you look at how many podcasts there are out there and how many of them are actually active, is an incredible. Most of them have been abandoned, basically, because and it's due to people either don't enjoy it or they don't find the time to be consistent, and then it just goes out of the window, really. So if you made it to 3+ episodes, you made it. So that's good. But
and I guess the other thing there is that It's the same with blogging. People start blogs, get a rush of blood to the head, they start a blog, and then they don't see it through. And YouTube shows, there's certainly a bit in YouTube shows as well. So, you've certainly got to be committed if you're going to do it. You need to probably plan. I work with one client, and we work 6 months in advance. So he puts one out every fortnight, and he knows for 6 months. So he's planned out until, well into February next year now.
Yeah.
And I think that's some people can do that. I'd struggle to do that. But it is a good way. And, if you've got someone to hold you accountable but if you look at it as a schedule, and obviously you do with your clients, when this is when it's going up. Wednesday at 12 o'clock, we need it by, if you're going to handball it off, someone needs a couple of days to get it done and all of that side of things. So, it's just a matter of putting it in and making it a priority as part of your marketing efforts.
Yes, absolutely. And also, like you said, I think trying to have a few episodes in the bank in advance will relieve a bit of stress as well, because you've got something there in case of. But also for people starting, I'd say you'd need a few episodes. You need to release, when you launch your podcast, it needs to have a few episodes already on there, because people will want to consume more than just one episode to make up their mind whether they want to continue with you or not. So I would advise for someone starting to have several episodes already there, ready to release, at least 2 or 3. Yeah.
Yep. That is 110% right. I advocate that, and my clients do that. We don't launch until they've probably got 2 maybe, but usually 3, if not 4, in the bank. Because and that you're exactly right. If people like it, and you've got a second one, they'll listen. You've got a third one, maybe they'll listen, and you're starting to get them into a habit, because podcasting is a habit, and you want them to subscribe, and you want them to come back to it. And that's the thing. If you lackadaisical with when you put them out, they'll stop coming back to your podcast. It might be on their app. They may have subscribed, but that doesn't mean they listen to it. So that is absolutely critical, is to have that ready. And if you can, if you're doing the interviews and you can batch produce, that's good. I know from experience. I can get 5 or 6 weeks in advance, but they chew up pretty quickly. You turn around and all of a sudden, I've got no more coming up. And there's a couple of other things, and I don't know, Bea, whether you do this with your clients, but I now, as I said, I now do things in seasons, and seasons are pretty long. And it just gives me a little bit of a break to catch up and to reassess, and more importantly for listeners, my actual listens go up when I'm not podcasting, because people are catching up. And the other part is you can do short runs as well. I don't see a lot of them, but you can. You might have a book you're about to release, or there might be a topic that only deserves 10 episodes, and you go in and you do a short run podcast on one particular topic and go in and go hard. I've seen that a number of times. Yeah, no,
those are things you can do. Yeah, absolutely. And maybe also another thing is to have a format for your episode that people can expect and stick to. And that can actually help save time as well. Having the format, following the format is good for you, your time, and your listeners, because they like to know what they're going to expect in that episode, in what order. So doesn't mean you can't throw in the oddball, but it's just
That's it. Alrighty, so rounding up, where we're talking podcasting, it's a long game. The big thing from your survey is that video. I think that was the biggest insight, that's growing, which I think is fantastic. People like to consume information or be entertained and be educated in different ways, different formats, different modalities. So that works, I think. Don't underestimate the power of YouTube as a distribution mechanism, and be planned and batch produce. Be in it for the long run. If you're going to do a fortnightly, do a fortnightly, and make sure that you stick to that. Look, if you go to a monthly, I would think that you'll probably drop off it pretty quick, and so will others. So
Yes,
I'm not a big one for monthlies, but it's monthly's better than nothing, I guess.
That's great.
And if you promote it well in between, that gives you at least gives you a reason for people to take notice of you. And of course, use someone like Bea to help you out in the back end of it all, because there is a little bit, and just going over that, you're going to need it edited, and produced from that point of view into the final file. It needs to be uploaded. You've got all the SEO and the tag,
And
getting it tagged and categorized, and all of that. There's a lot there, and then getting it, getting the show notes up, getting it out, and then cutting it up and promoting it. So it's a show. It's a cornerstone project of your content marketing, and needs to be given that time and effort.
Absolutely, and then you can enjoy it if you get the time.
That's it. Enjoy the process and meet a lot of interesting people along the way. Be great to talk. Great to see that podcasting's alive and well, and people are enthusiastic, and business owners are embracing the medium. Where can people find you if they want to catch up with you or talk to you about the survey results or get a copy of them?
Yeah, sure. Well, so you can email me. So it's bea@bearforward.com. Or you can also find me on LinkedIn under Bea Abalti. I'd love to hear from everybody. So come and talk to me.
Excellent. All right. Thank you very much for your time, Bea.
The reputation economy is here. The world today needs more genuine, credible experts and leaders to stand up and share their experience, their wisdom, their stories and ideas. Are you in?